all I would repeat to my therapist was, I'm so scared, I don't understand, I don't want this. In those moments when those thoughts are so loud, I always try to listen to my gut, and I think beyond OCD, you need to know that you are a good person, you're not defined by these thoughts and what they try to tell you, no matter how taboo they might be. Non-OCD related, I'm a writer, and my latest, which is coming out, is called Mindfire. It's basically a roadmap for anyone struggling in their mental health and looking for guidance. I'm just trying to help people feel less alone. I wish I had a tool like this when I was 18 and I was first going through it. I'm not trying to be a doctor or a therapist, because I know I'm not. I'm just a real girl, a 22-year-old girl, sharing her struggles with anxiety and OCD in hopes that people will relate.
Hi, everyone. It's May, which means it's Mental Health Awareness Month. And since this episode is launching in May, we wanted to just acknowledge that and remind you that even though May is designated as Mental Health Awareness Month, we believe every month is Mental Health Awareness Month. Remember, with OCD, you're not just your thoughts or your images or urges, even if OCD tries to tell you otherwise. Now, at NOCD, our mission, well, it's pretty simple. We want to help people reclaim their lives from OCD and related conditions. We want to increase access to care, virtual therapy, specialized treatment, and it's covered by insurance for over 155 million Americans. So whether it's May or any other time of the year, that mission doesn't change for us, right? We're here to help you live the life that you want to live and not the life that OCD wants you to live. If you or a loved one or a friend are struggling with OCD or related conditions, download the NOCD app and learn more about all of the various resources and tools and treatment options we have available. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Hi again, everyone. Great to have you on another episode of the Get to Know OCD podcast. If you like the podcast, feel free to subscribe to the NOCD YouTube channel. Today, Carrie Berk's with me, who's got a book coming out about life with OCD, and we're going to talk about what her life's been like living with OCD and coming out on the other side. So, Carrie, thanks so much for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, tell everyone a little bit about you and what kind of brought you to this point in your life.
So, non-OCD related, I'm a writer and influencer. I've been writing since I was 8 years old. I've actually published 21 children's books with my mom.
Wow,
and
that's awesome.
When I got a little bit older, I started doing some solo debuts. So I published my real life rom-com in September 2024, which was kind of teaching the younger generation how to navigate the dating world. And my latest, which is coming out, is called Mindfire, which I know we're going to talk a little bit more about later on. But it's basically a roadmap for anyone struggling in their mental health and looking for guidance.
Okay. Mindfire. Tell us about the name. I like that.
Thank you. Mindfire, I feel like originally I wanted it to be brain on fire, because when we're experiencing OCD, it often feels like our brain is on fire and so loud and heavy and just burdened by all of these intrusive thoughts. So I knew that that was a phrase I definitely wanted to include, fire. And I wanted to do brain on fire, but it sounded a little bit too clinical. And then I thought girl on fire, and that's too similar to the Alicia Keys song.
I just started singing a song in my head as you said that. Yeah.
So then mind on fire I liked, but it was too wordy. So then I got rid of on, and then I just decided to put the two words together and almost coin a new phrase in itself. So Mindfire.
Love it. So, and this kind of roadmap through mental health, you specifically have struggled with OCD. It's what we talk about, obviously, here on the Get to Know OCD podcast. Can you tell us about what it was like for you to discover OCD as a part of your life and what that's been like for you?
Yeah. So it kind of dates back to when I was around 8 years old. I had OCD and I didn't really know it because it wasn't really talked about in schools. It wasn't discussed in my family or among my friends. but basically everything had to be even on both sides. So if I touched something with my right hand, I would have to touch with my left hand. Otherwise, I wouldn't be at peace with my day. And that went on for about a year until I kind of stepped back and I said, this is taking over my life. I'm going to start losing the people I love if this is the way I just continue to live and exist. So 8-year-old me was much smarter than I give her credit for and was able to pull herself out of it. And for years, my OCD was not really raging as it was back then until I turned 18. It was the middle of the pandemic. We were all at home, stuck in quarantine, and really forced to look inward and think of whatever popped into our head. And people with OCD, it was really difficult because those solo moments, you could really catch yourself ruminating over something more than you'd like. So I was sitting on the couch one day with my mom, and all of a sudden I just couldn't catch my breath. And I took myself to get a COVID test. It wasn't COVID. And that's when my mom proposed this idea that it might just be anxiety. And to me, anxiety was the same thing as stress, I thought.
Sure.
I just assumed it was like the butterfly feeling you get before a test. I didn't really understand how debilitating it could be until that shallow breathing became a pattern, and I started to wake up sweating, and my palms were shaking so much to the point where I dropped my breakfast on the floor. And it started off as purely just physical anxiety symptoms until one day at a pumpkin patch with my friend, she told me that her anxiety got so bad to the point where she'd actually cut her wrists. And then she showed me her wrists. And in that moment, I felt triggered, I think is the best way to describe it.
Sure. Yeah.
My brain made this association that if she had anxiety and I had anxiety, that I was destined to end up like her, that I was going to hurt myself because I thought that's what people with anxiety do.
Sure.
Then I latched on to this intrusive thought that I was going to hurt myself. And I didn't want to. I loved my life. I was blowing up on social media at the time. None of it made any sense. But still, I latched on to this thought, and I just could not let it go. And it wasn't until I went to a therapist, got my diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder and OCD, and really started educating myself about that side of OCD no one sees, which is that intense mental rumination, those taboo intrusive thoughts that are really contrary to who you are and what you value. That's when I really started to turn a corner. Because up until that point, I had no baseline education. I felt so alone in what I was going through. And all I just wanted was guidance and for someone to not just tell me, but show me that I wasn't alone.
I'm glad you brought up that feeling of alone, because there's so many people who have mental health concerns who feel like they are the only person in the world who has this. Or like you saw with your friend, you jump to the worst case scenario of what could happen in your life because of this. So that must have really been disabling for you at some points.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I didn't really understand what anxiety was to begin with. And for her to say, yeah, I have anxiety, and then just like roll up her sleeve and show me her cut wrists, that was, like you said, jumping to the worst case scenario. And in a time where so many people around me were dying because we were in a pandemic, what I valued most in my life was feeling alive and existing. And OCD just attacks what we value most in life. So of course, that's what it chose in 2020.
And, it too, self-injury comes into play for some people because they have trouble managing the emotions they're experiencing. So they may use that as distraction. They may use that to make a feeling that they feel like they can control. Sometimes people even unfortunately get to the point of suicidal thoughts and make gestures toward that and sadly even complete that. And I'm glad that you were able to seize that, be triggered by it, but not take it to that level. That's good.
Well, what was interesting was I was having these intrusive thoughts about self-harm, but they were different than suicidal thoughts. Like suicidal thoughts and intrusive thoughts about suicide are completely different things.
100%.
And at the time, I didn't really understand that distinction because I'd never had any thought of me related to suicide pop into my head. So it was difficult to teach myself that that was not something I aligned with. It was a thought that scared me. I think acknowledging that fear was a really important part.
Yeah, the ego's dystonic nature of the OCD experience, as we say, right? I
Yeah.
don't want this. And it's something we talk about a lot with people when we're working with folks who have harm OCD, who fear, what if I were to harm myself?
Hmm.
And we always have disclaimers when we're doing therapy with people that we have to warn authorities if we feel you're a danger to self or others. But even as therapists, we have to recognize when we're working with someone, there is that difference between somebody who is going to harm themselves and someone who has an OCD fear of what if I were to harm myself, and approach it that way in treatment.
Right. I mean, that was all I would repeat to my therapist was, I'm so scared. I'm so scared. I don't understand. I don't want this. It was
Yeah.
never, I want to do this. I'm planning to do this. Here's exactly what I want to do. That wasn't it at all. It was just the fact that there was this word, self harm, suicide, these words floating through my head that I couldn't seem to shake, that I didn't want there. And
Yeah.
that was the key. And that, I think, was the key that my therapist was listening for too. The fact that when I was speaking, every other word that came out of my mouth was, I'm so scared. I'm so scared. I'm so scared.
Right. And that person with those suicidal thoughts may not actually even want those thoughts either, but also be so in such despair that they feel like that's the only way that they can go out. And you were at least saying, I know I want something else, but why are these thoughts there? What's happening? Versus someone who's just kind of given in to saying, there is nothing else there for me. And this is the only option, it seems, at this point in time.
Mm. In
Yeah.
those moments when those thoughts are so loud, I always try to listen to my gut, and it
Good.
sounds kind
Mhm.
of cheesy, but it's really true. Like when your thoughts are loud, you have the power to close your eyes and look inwards and listen to your gut and know what your gut and your heart really want. And I knew just how much I wanted to live and how happy I was, and that's why everything that was going through my mind was so frustrating, because none of it made sense. I knew it was specifically triggered by something, and having a deliberate trigger was also, it made it a little bit easier for me, I guess, to go through instead
Yeah.
of just, me crying every day and being like, I don't want to live anymore. Like, that wasn't the case. It was
Right.
me having a visible trigger and having already gone through anxiety over the past few months. That's when my OCD started to rage a little bit and go, oh, okay, I'm going to latch on to this thing right now because it seems to really bug you. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to nag at you over and over again. And you're going to have to feed me and convince me why you want to live. But as you
Mm-hmm.
know, and as we all know with OCD, it's like trying to give your OCD an escape thought is like feeding a cup with a hole in it. So no
It's
matter how many
yeah.
times I said, I want to live because XYZ, or this is why the thought is not true because XYZ, that would just make it worse. It would
It's
add
not
more
enough.
fuel to the fire.
Yep, it's a great example, and I appreciate you saying that. I use the example of there's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, all the time, right? That you just can't fill it. And I like what you talked about too, this idea of searching through yourself to try to find that truth. And if OCD is good at anything, it's getting you to doubt absolutely everything.
Mm,
So you know. You on the other side have shown people that you can have a feeling about something and you can learn how to live with multiple feelings. OCD may say, don't trust that. You may feel internally, I can trust that. And I'm going to go with that and not have to listen to what the OCD says.
hmm Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all about trusting your gut and knowing yourself. And I
Yeah.
think beyond OCD, you need to know that you are a good person. You're not defined by these thoughts and what they try to tell you, no matter how taboo they might be.
Yep. Hardest part of treatment. I would say that's one of the most difficult things that I have to do as a therapist is to have people take a step back from what the OCD is telling them, allow them to learn that they can live with doubt, they can live with uncertainty. They
Right.
don't have to listen to what the OCD says. It's not a good moral flagpole to to kind of move toward, and
hmm
that there are other things going on inside of you that you can pay far more attention to than what the OCD is telling
Yeah, I like what you said about uncertainty. That's something that I mention a lot in my book, Mindfire. This feeling of living with maybe. And instead of answering your thought with a strong no, that's why it's not true, saying, maybe it is, maybe it's not, I don't know, I'm just going to move on with your day. That is so difficult for someone with OCD, but it's so important because instead of addressing the thought directly and addressing a thought that doesn't need to be addressed in the first place, instead you're just letting it exist and flow normally as a garbage thought.
Yeah. It's just, a leaf floating down a stream or something like that. There it is, and there it goes. Goodbye. All right, whatever. Moving on. And yet they feel so real. If there's one thing I hear from people all the time, even in webinars, people will say to me, and I'd love your answer on this, why does it have to feel so real? So that breathing and all those things, they absolutely felt so real to you. And yet I'm sure you look back at them now and go, well, that was ridiculous, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, part of the reason why they feel so real is because of our reaction to them. So when I was having these intrusive thoughts about self-harm, I was basically numb. I mean, I was so upset and scared and just constantly like sitting in silence and ruminating. And these emotions of sadness and fear, I thought they were because the thoughts held truth and because those emotions were a direct result of wanting to self-harm, in air quotes. What I didn't realize is those feelings were totally separate from the thought I was having. They were results of the OCD. I was reacting to the OCD. I wasn't reacting to the thought because the thought doesn't hold the truth.
Right. And we've been taught our entire lives that if that fight, flight, or freeze response is activated and you feel those feelings so intensely, it must mean you're in danger.
Yeah.
And that's where OCD is a bit of a jerk because it knows that, and it'll be like, oh, I can make you feel like you're in danger based just on an idea, right?
Exactly.
Something
My
like
mom
that.
would always tell me when I was first going through it, it's just a fire alarm going off in your head. Just ignore it. False fire alarm. And almost today, I'm like triggered by that phrase because I just remember her saying it over and over and over again. And that would become a compulsion in itself. When I would have an intrusive thought and I'd tell my mom, and then she'd say, yep, it's a fire alarm. Like that would become a compulsion. We'd repeat that every single day. So in thinking about that, like the false fire alarm, it's funny now. I don't like using that metaphor personally because I just think back to that day and I'm like, that was not helpful for me.
Sure. But in some ways, you've almost redeemed it because you have fire in the title of your book with Mindfire. So
Oh
I
my
wonder if
God.
there's kind of a circle that comes through in all of that.
We're embracing the fire.
There we go. Yeah, there we
There you
go.
go.
So tell us more about the book and what you've got in there. I'm excited to hear.
Yeah, so Mindfire, as I mentioned, is a roadmap or a guide for anyone who's struggling, especially in their anxiety and their OCD. I detail my personal experiences with anxiety and OCD, kind of expanding upon the story I just told you. And each chapter is dedicated to a different emotion you might experience when in a negative thought cycle or in a mental health bout. So the first chapter is trapped. I also talk about grief, loneliness, restlessness, heartbreak. And at the end, those emotions turn a little more to the positive side. So I have a chapter called Growth because you can be growing and still experience anxiety. So it's filled with personal stories and anecdotes. I also include little call out boxes with real therapists giving mental health definitions, like what is an intrusive thought, OCD versus OCPD, because that was an important one for me to understand. But at the end of the day, I'm just trying to help people feel less alone. I wish I had a tool like this when I was 18 and I was first going through it. I'm not trying to be a doctor or a therapist because I know I'm not. I'm just a real girl, a 22-year-old girl sharing her struggles with anxiety and OCD in hopes that people will relate. Because there's enough data out there. There are enough doctors and therapists, which is all fantastic, but there aren't enough real people sharing their stories. And that's the gap that I'm trying to fill.
Did OCD try to hijack the experience of writing the book ever?
That's a good question. It was actually quite therapeutic.
Good.
I wrote a lot of this in 2020 as diary entries when I was going through really intense OCD. And I never, ever thought I was going to publish this. It was so intimate and scary. but it helped. Journaling was really therapeutic. Putting the words on the page helped me understand my anxiety and my OCD and brought me to a place of just inner peace. So, not really, oddly enough, not in
Mhm.
writing the book, but in my day to day life, yeah, like checking my emails multiple times and looking through my trash and making sure I didn't delete something important.
Sure.
I'm a TikTok influencer on the side. I make sure I didn't delete B roll by accident. So, if anything, on the social media and like everyday job side of things, yes, it affects it. But in terms of writing my book, it was really just an outlet for me to kind of let it all out. And I don't know, it was really organic. Like, I feel like I've never had an experience in writing a book where the words kind of just flew out of me in a way that it did when I was writing Mindfire.
Mhm. Looking back even earlier in your life, going to that 8-year-old girl who's
Mhm.
writing books for kids and at the same time struggling with intrusive thoughts.
Yeah.
What there's little kids out there who might watch this or read some of your books. What's your advice for them? How do you want to motivate them to face their fears and live
Yeah.
the life they want to live?
I mean, for kids and for anyone, I'd say just to practice patience. In the moment, anxiety and OCD can both feel so real and heavy and debilitating. And I would just say to give it time and practice patience with yourself. There's no finish line you're trying to reach with a cure waiting or a trophy or a medal to put around your neck. That's not the case. What you are searching for is a way to live with it and to exist and be strong in your mental health disorder. If you're just constantly trying to chase that finish line, you're going to be setting an unrealistic expectation for yourself. That's only going to lead to more anxiety and disappointment. So I would just say to practice patience, to practice learning how to exist instead of just rushing to get better or find a cure. And then showing yourself grace if there are days that are a little harder than others, because there definitely will be.
So OCD, I like that, is always moving the finish line. What's it like to accept that you'll never cross the OCD finish line?
Oh, I love that question. It's scary. I think I have to remind myself that some days too, because obviously, I mean, I'm writing this book, but I'm not a I'm not perfect. I'm not a hero. I think in one of the last chapters of my book, I wrote like one thing has been missing this whole time I've been writing, and it's the fact that I haven't admitted to you that I'm still not necessarily okay or perfect or cured. So, yeah, I mean, every day I kind of have to remind myself of my own advice and tell myself that you're not trying to fix anything, you're just trying to be stronger. And I think in those moments, I do things that make me feel strong mentally. So for me, that's running or writing or having a productive day where I film a lot of TikTok videos. Just turning, I like to say, turning pain into productivity, and
Hmm.
that's what I do. That's my response. I think in those moments where I doubt that phrase I coined, I guess, of trying not to reach a finish line, and instead trying to live in your anxiety and your OCD.
Yeah, I've sometimes said for the older crowd who will get this one, because I don't know if they showed these as much for kids when you were growing up, which was so sad. But uh, I'd say Lucy would always hold the football, but every time Charlie Brown went to kick it, she'd pick it up and he'd go flying through the air, right? And that's what I think OCD is like. It's tempting. It's here. It's here. Oh, no, no, sorry, you're never gonna make it.
Right.
You're never gonna get there.
And sometimes you will let it consume you, and that's what's so
Yeah.
tough. And in those moments, I kick myself because I know I'm better than that. Like when I get a panic attack now, and
Hmm.
I do usually like once a month, every other month, something like that. I get like a panic attack, and I'll start crying to my family member, to my boyfriend, and I'll say, I feel so guilty. I feel so
Mm-hmm.
ashamed because I know I'm better than this. I'm preaching to people out there how they can fix their mental health, but here I am a shriveled up mess right now. Like, why is this happening to me? And I think the answer to that is because I'm human,
There you
and
go.
my brand is not trying to be perfect. I'm trying to present myself as someone who's real and vulnerable and authentic. And that's something that I don't shy away from in my book. And I think it's important for other people to realize that too. Not every day is going to be perfect.
You can be successful at being authentic. You can only fail at being perfect.
I like that. I have some line like that in my book too. I'm trying to remember. It's like you can be you can be in pain but still something. You can be something but still something. I don't know. I forgot. You got to get the book to read it.
Well, we'll definitely be encouraging everyone to do that. That's for sure. Yeah. There's 5 safety behaviors that come along with OCD. There's avoidance, there's reassurance seeking, there's distraction, there's substance use, there's compulsions. What role did those various things play in your life? And being the tricky thing OCD is, how did it suck other people in your life into providing those things for you too?
Oh my god. Okay, what were the ones you named?
Avoidance?
Avoidance.
Yeah.
For me, I'm just going to talk about that like specific
Yeah.
self-harm instance.
Mm-hmm.
I would just avoid anything related to self-harm, so like razors,
Sure.
knives.
There we go.
Anytime there was like a mention of like suicide on the screen, I would like freak out and run up to my bedroom, and I'd be in for the night. So that would be the avoidance.
Reassurance seeking?
Oh god, all the time.
We could do an hour on that one, probably.
Right. Every night I would like set up a time to confess my thoughts to my mom.
Oh yeah, there we go.
I talk a lot about confession in my book because beyond the self-harm thoughts, that's something I've really struggled with over the years as my thoughts have kind of ebbed and flowed, and the themes, my OCD themes, have changed. And I struggle a lot with that because sometimes with OCD, you feel like you need to confess your thoughts in order to feel better or feel at peace. And I felt like I couldn't go about my day unless I said my thoughts aloud to someone, no matter how hurtful or damaging they could be to the person. So for a while I did that, and I was realizing how much it was affecting the people around me and even hurting the people around me the more that I was saying these dark, mean things that were going on in my mind. But it was giving me almost like the reassurance of like, oh, I can say this thing out loud and my life will still go on. And my life was going on, but I was hurting people around me. Yeah. So it wasn't doing anything helpful.
Distraction.
There's positive and negative distraction. So for positive distraction, I became a runner during the pandemic because running was the only time when my thoughts were a little quieter. And I just felt free and I felt mentally strong, and that serves as a really positive outlet for me today. I think negative distraction is when you start almost like avoiding your thoughts instead of accepting them and moving forward. Correct. I think there's a difference.
Yeah. Oh, huge. Yeah. Right? What you describe as kind of the positive distraction, I describe as living your life. Right? You can live your life with intrusive thoughts and images and urges.
Right.
And you've learned how to do that. So that's how I see it.
Right. Because you can acknowledge your thought and realize it's there and then live your life, as you say. Move on.
Yep.
But the other way is if you see the thought and immediately your reaction is like, oh my God, okay, let me do something else. And you're just pretending the thought never happened.
There you go. So that's it.
That would be the distraction. Okay, there was one more.
Substance use sometimes comes into a role for some people.
Like drugs
or alcohol. Some people, in fact, we know at least a third of people with OCD at some point will start to experiment with substances as a way to try to see if it can be managing of their intrusive thoughts, images, and urges.
Interesting. The way I'm laughing at myself, like, drugs, me?
Yeah.
I'm on medication, like an SSRI, but besides that, no, I'm not a big alcohol fan. I never have been. Oddly enough, I actually find it makes my anxiety much worse.
Yeah, that can happen. and a lot of people are even moving to THC or marijuana use now, and that can also, for some people, increase anxiety, feelings of like paranoia or things of that nature, which can be a
Yeah.
trigger for some anxiety for folks too. So,
Yeah. I think alcohol for me is generally worse than like weed. I feel like
mm,
alcohol, every time I've had an experience, it's been negative. Like, for example, and everyone listening is going to laugh at me. I drank alcohol for the first time on my 21st birthday. Like, not even joking. That was my first drink. And it was like one drink. I didn't even get drunk. And I just started like bawling in the
mm,
middle of the bar and just like burst into a full blown panic attack. Like, how do I know? I talk about this. I wrote the whole experience in my book. I'm like, am I happy? How do I know if I'm happy? What does it mean to be happy? And I just started like ruminating on like life and happiness, and I was a disaster. I had never experienced like that deep of a panic attack.
hmm
And then I made my boyfriend take me home. I'm like, you gotta get me out of here. I gotta go to sleep right now.
yeah. You're in the middle of a beautiful parade, and OCD is the Clydesdales, and they've just pooped all over the street, right? I
Exactly.
mean, that's
I love that.
that's exactly what you're describing there. Yeah,
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
really
obviously
really
don't
tough.
love that, but that metaphor is
No.
it's funny. I wish I heard that in the moment. Maybe it would have helped.
Yeah. So you go out, you have your TikTok, you're an influencer, but I'm sure OCD has played some role in that too. And how do you move past whatever OCD tries to stick its hands into
Mhm.
and keep living your life?
I guess you just remember what matters. I mean, in terms of my career, like writing is my first love, and I would not let anything, not even something as tricky as OCD, cut into that. So even in those moments when I kind of feel it coming on, I feel myself wanting to double check something and check something 5 times, I have to take a step back and go, this is your passion. This is what you love. Do you really want to mess this up right now? And the same thing with TikTok. If I'm filming like, I don't know, a really expensive brand deal, I
Mhm.
kind of just use like the money as like leverage for me to stop. So I'm like, if you don't finish filming this brand deal right now, you might not get your money. And
Mhm.
that's just like a reality check. Like if you spend 2 hours filming this brand deal and you don't get a chance to finish it, you might actually miss out on the chance to earn yourself your rent.
Mhm.
So I think two things. I think putting myself in perspective, realigning with my passion and what I love, and realizing if that's really worth sacrificing for the sake of my OCD. That's how I move on.
That's great. Because if you missed your rent, OCD would not take the blame for it. It would say, well,
Yeah,
if you had just done it the right way, you wouldn't have had to worry about that.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a silly one, and saying it out loud, I realize I've never really like vocalized it that way, but it's true. Like if I spend way too long working on something, I might miss out. Or even
Right.
in my job, like if I spend, I don't know, if I spend like 3 hours working on an article and don't turn it in on time, those hours might add up over time, and I might get fired one day because I'm not quick enough. Like
hmm
it could be really detrimental in the long run if I'm not doing my job and my work efficiently because OCD is getting in the way.
Right. Yeah. OCD and efficiency are quite polar opposites of each other.
Yeah. And it's funny because people assume OCD is all about being efficient and keeping things organized and, your pencils in order. You'd really appreciate this one as like a doctor. I learned about OCD. There was like a 5-minute lecture in a physical science class
Oh,
in
okay.
college.
hmm
And it was like a day when we talked about mental health. There was one slide about OCD, talked about it for like 5 minutes. And they put a picture up on the smart board, and it's a stock image of somebody cleaning a smart board.
Hmm.
I was, at the time, I was going through really intense self harm thoughts. And I was like, oh my God, I feel so misrepresented right now. Like,
Absolutely.
nobody understands that it's not just cleaning, it's not just organization. There are so many other categories of OCD that are just not talked about.
I think that's the beauty of what you can do with your social media platforms is
Mhm.
to educate people that it isn't just straightening something, checking a lock,
Yeah,
or washing your hands, that there are so many other ways OCD is experienced. It's part of the reason we do the podcast as well, to
yeah,
bring that education to the world.
100%. That's what I'm trying to do with my book, with my platform. I think it's scary, but it's also important because there isn't enough mental health education in schools, in my opinion. There aren't enough real people coming out and sharing their struggles. But again, like I can't carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. So my hope is that in reading this book, people will be inspired to start opening up and sharing their own stories. And it doesn't have to be them making their own books. It can be as simple as talking to one person and one friend, because that one friend might talk to another friend who talks to another friend, and before we know it, the conversation is spreading and going to new heights that we never could have seen it going to.
Do you have a good answer when you're saying things and people still might understand it and they say to you, "Oh, I have a little of that too"?
Oh my god, the worst. My mom says that every time. I love her to death, but she every time I'm like, yeah, I have OCD. She's like, it's okay. Like I have really intense OCD sometimes too. I'm like, no, you don't. Like
Mhm.
you do not understand. Um, what I always say is when you're trying to talk about your OCD with somebody,
Mhm.
put it in the simplest terms possible and pretend like you're talking to the lowest common denominator,
Okay.
at least at first.
Yeah, yeah.
So, for example, tell someone, I'm feeling really angry right now because I'm balling up my fists or because I'm sweating, or I don't know, just putting it in like terms that people will actually understand. Because if you go at someone and go, hi, I'm having OCD and I'm having an intrusive thought about killing myself, they might not know how to handle that. They're most likely not going to know how to handle that.
Sure.
So you start off, I think, putting it in words that they actually understand, like I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm scared, like these emotions that they're more familiar with. And over time, you can open up, I think, about these specific ways in which your OCD or anxiety are manifesting. But to set yourself up for success, I think, at least at first, going into it and talking to someone who might not be as educated, putting it at that baseline level.
Your peers likely have known you seem very open about things. Again, thank you for that, because we need voices of this. But how have friends and extended family members reacted? Because I know for myself in my own life, there are people like, I'm so appreciative of what you do. And there's other people I know that says, I don't know why you need your job. Just tell people to stop thinking about it. That should be fine.
Mm,
So how has it been for you to be open, and how's the reaction been from others in your life?
yeah. For friends specifically, my chapter 1 Trapped, I actually almost exclusively talk about what it was like opening up to my friends for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
because my family knew, they were living with me.
Sure.
So my friends, I had different experiences with different people. My first friend I told is not a mental health advocate, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
She's kind of the type of person who pushes things down and marches to the beat of her own drum. And, she appears to be a very strong, confident person. And I admire that sometimes. But when it comes to actually wanting to open up to her about my mental health, it was very difficult because she didn't get it. She just thought I wanted to kill myself. And no matter how much I told her, it was a foreign concept, and I just eventually gave up. I was talking in circles, and I said, "This is my best friend. I love her. I'm obviously not going to let her go, but I need to set boundaries, and I don't think my mental health and my OCD is something I could talk about with her." And I
Mm-hmm.
kind of just left it there, and I still leave it there to this day. Even like with my book coming out, she's not going to read the book because she doesn't care to, which is whatever.
This
It's
is
her
fine. Yeah.
decision.
Mm-hmm.
But she'll still post about it. She'll comment on my photos. She'll support it
Mm-hmm.
in whatever way she can, and she'll support me in whatever way she can. But for
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason, whether it's if she just doesn't care about OCD or if she's dealing with mental health struggles of her own that she might want to admit, we don't know. But for whatever reason, she doesn't want to face whatever I have to say. And I've come to peace with that. The other friend was the total opposite. She understood it almost to a fault. She'd been seeing a therapist for several years. She was on medication, and it became all we talked about. So every time we hung out, it would just turn into a big sob session, and we'd only talk about our mental health, and we forgot how to have fun with each other anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And one day we kind of had to turn around and go, like, where did our lives go? Why aren't we not having fun days at the pool anymore? Why are we not going out and doing things? Why are we just cooped up in the house all the time? And then there are people who are the in between. So I feel like I'll use my boyfriend as an example for the in between. He's never experienced OCD like I have. He will never fully get it, and I accept that. But at the same time, he listens, and he's receptive, and he's making a conscious effort to learn, and he asks questions. So I think that's the ideal scenario. You can't expect everyone to understand, but the best people will at least try to, and will ask questions, and yeah, I guess just like make a conscious effort to be there for you.
That's awesome. Well, and I think anybody who's struggling with mental health has to recognize that that is how the world works, right? Not everybody is going to understand it, but they can still be supportive potentially in their own way, even if they don't understand it. And it's okay if some people don't just get it. That's all right.
Yeah, people can support in whatever way they can. Like, support is support at the end of the day. Even the best friend that won't listen to me about my OCD, she's still there whenever I need to call her about job woes, or if I had a fight with another friend. Like, she will be there to listen. She's still there for me, but she can't do it all. Like, she doesn't check every single box on like the perfect friend list. But like, nobody's perfect at the end of the day, and I don't resent her for not being able to listen and be as receptive to my OCD as I'd like.
Before we go, those who are listening right now, maybe who are on the fence about getting treatment, opening up about this, what's your advice to them?
I think you need to want this. I had a brief experience with a therapist when I was younger, non-OCD related, that I just didn't want. I was forced into it by my parents. If you want to get better, it has to come from you. Nobody can force you into it. And I think just realizing that you can't do it all, and it's okay to ask for help. I think what's so great about what NOCD is doing is you guys are making it okay to ask for help. It doesn't feel like you're talking necessarily to a doctor. It feels like you're talking to a friend, just by how comfortable the conversation is. And a friend that knows more about OCD than the average friend, obviously. But yeah, I would just say, just realizing you can't do it all. Nobody knows it all. You don't have to feel like a coward, I guess, for asking for help. It doesn't make you a hero for going through it by yourself. It makes you even more strong if you have the courage to speak up and ask for help.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for trusting us for that too. I really appreciate that, and all the work that you're doing, because I want one thing for anybody who works with NOCD, and that is to live the life you want to live and not the life that OCD wants you to live. And you're a shining example of someone who's doing that. So thank you for that work that you did to get there.
Gold star.
Gold stars all the way around. Awesome.
That's just maybe that's an intrusive thought that went through my head when you said a shining example. I just saw like a gold star.
I like it. I like it. I think it's great. Wonderful. Maybe a Mindfire 2 with a gold star or something like that. There you go. Well, Carrie Berk, thank you so much for being here today. I really do appreciate it, and your openness and honesty, and great work on the book. And you're going to have a opening, I think, release coming out soon, right? Is that coming out?
So Mindfire is out on May 13th on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and also I've been posting all about it on my Instagram, hosting a little book party. So I'm just really excited to kick the whole thing off.
Awesome. Well, all the best, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you.
And if you like what we were talking about today on the Get to Know OCD podcast, check us out at NOCD.com and the NOCD YouTube channel. We'd be more than happy to have you join us in future episodes where we talk to others who struggle with and have come through what it's like to live with OCD. Thanks for being here. We'll see you again in the future.